In this part of the tutorial, we are going to add some better functionality for killing the player or for ending the game. Because right now, when we play the game, we are basing our live state on colliders, which means that whenever you exit one of these boxes here, well, then we'll check if the player should die. And if you just run over the first edge here, you won't die, because we're not checking if we are alive when we run off the first platform. So we will actually have to add some better functionality for keeping the player alive and for making him die. Right now, sometimes you can run over edges you're not supposed to run over, and sometimes you're dying when you're not supposed to die. So to fix this, we will have to add a new empty game object. So click on your player in the hierarchy here, click create, and select a empty game object, create empty. And this object here is going to be called contact point. So this is the contact point of the player, which means that this point, if it hits the ground, well, then there shouldn't, then the player should be alive. But if it doesn't hit the ground, well, then the player is dead. So we take this one and put under the player. So right now the player, we should place it right under the player. So it's actually just on the bottom of the player here, as it is here in my screen. If it's not placed there by default, then you have to move it here by yourself. And then you place it as a child object of the player. So when you've done that, you can open up your player script. And in here, we'll have to add 2 more things up here, or some more things at least. We'll have to add a public layer mask and call it what is ground. So this layer mask is going to decide what the ground is for the player. So maybe later there you could add some other things that are not ground, so the player will fall to the ground, for example. And then we're going to make a private bool called is playing. And this defines if the player is already playing the game, which is used whenever we click the first mouse button. And then we need to make a public transform and call it contact point. So this is our contact point right here. Yeah, so now we have these 3 variables here. Just write what is ground for the player, and this one indicates if the player is playing the game. And this is a reference to the contact point. Okay, when we have done that, we can add a new function called isGrounded. So let's go all the way to the bottom here under GameOver and write private void isGrounded. And this function here is going to decide if the player is hitting the ground or not. And if he's not grounded, well, then it should return false actually. So instead of having it as a void, we can actually make it into a bool. So we can return true or false based on whenever the player is on the ground or off the ground. So then we'll have to create some spheres, or like create 1 sphere actually, because if we look at this in Unity, we have this little contact point, and around this contact point I would like to create a little sphere that collides with the ground. And if that one collides with the ground, well, then we're grounded. But if we go off the edge here, we'll notice right away then we are off the ground and the player should die and fall to the ground. So we are going to make collider, like if I could spell correctly, collider, like an array of colliders, and call colliders equals physics dot overlap sphere contact point. So this is the start position of the sphere, it's contact point, and the radius could be like 5 or something like 0.5. And what is ground is the layer mask we just created. So contact point to transform, I guess. That position, sorry. Let's see here. Let's see, what is this even? What did I make it into? A track. Yeah, okay. So this is going to be a transform instead. I don't know why I wrote that other thing. Let's save and go back down here. and dot position. So we're going to create a sphere at this position, and it has a radius of 0.5, and it's going to check if it collides with this layer mask here we are creating. And then all the colliders that the player is colliding with is going to be added to this array. So we're going to check by saying for each of these colliders, and colliders.length colliders. There we go, .length. So we run through all the colliders in this array, and if the current collider we are looking at, if the game object here isn't the player itself, so if it's different from the player, well, then we return true, which means that we are grounded, we're standing on the ground. Else we are going to return false out here. So now the grounded function is creating a sphere around the player, around that little contact point. We check if that contact point is colliding with something else than the player. If it is, well, then we're on the ground. If it doesn't collide with something else than the player, then we're not grounded anymore. So we can go to our onTrigger exit here, and basically we can take all the functionality in here, and we can actually just comment it out. And the only functionality we need is actually this one in here. So the functionality inside the inner if statement, we need to copy it, and then we need to go to update and paste it in here, and just uncomment it. So we're going to do all this. We're going to kill the player, create the GameOver function, set the reset button to active, stop the camera for following the player if we're not grounded. So if grounded is grounded, that's what I call it, yeah. If that's false, we're going to make an exclamation mark here in front of it. We're gonna make it negative. There we go. So now if the player isn't grounded, we're going to kill him instead of relying on the onTrigger exit here. So we can actually delete the whole onTrigger exit function here. So if we save this and go back to Unity, then we'll have to select the player. As you can see here, there should be a contact point as transform. So just take the contact point and put it down here. And then there's like written here, what is ground? Right now, nothing is ground. So this is not going to work right now. We have to set that everything is ground for now. Maybe if you have some other layers or something you want to use, then you can put something else, but I'm just going to select everything here. One more thing, if I could find the script here. If we check, we have this is playing bool, and it needs to be set as false from the beginning. And then we have to go to our mouse button here. So when we click the mouse button and we are not dead, we are going to say is playing. It's true. So now we're playing, and then we're also going to check here and is playing. So we're only checking if we're grounded and we're playing, then we're dead and everything. So we don't start the game by being dead, just by that. So this little check here disables the ground check before we click the mouse button, else we'd just die when we play the game like this. Okay, so I can play the game. Can I die? Yes. So when I go over the edge, I die. Let's check here in the beginning. Boom. I also die from the first edge here. So right now, this should actually fit a little better by being dead. You can go kind of close to the edge here, you can see. You should be able to die right away when you get over the edge now. So that was a little fix for doing that. Of course, the character is not spinning. Right now, if he would spin, then the contact point would move around. So instead of that, we will have to put the contact point out of the player and make it follow the player instead, if that's what you're doing. But we can take a look at that later. But that's what I want to do for now. Again, thanks for watching, and remember to support me by either buying the projects or follow me on Patreon. And remember to check out my Twitter, my Facebook, and subscribe to this channel. Bye.